Believe it or not, but December football is officially here. This season has been flying by, and here in week 13 of the NFL season, there's some major games that could provide some huge implications for what the playoff picture is looking like. Let's get into a preview and my predictions for the week. And first up, as we look towards the schedule, we've got the Seattle Seahawks versus the Dallas Cowboys on Thursday night. Not exactly the most interesting matchup. It could be a very big game for Seattle if they play well and/or win it. That could change a lot of narratives around them and being a pretty fraudulent team in the last couple of weeks or so. But just knowing how they've done in the month of November, compared to a Cowboys team that has caught fire, especially on the offensive end, you'd have to imagine the Cowboys win this pretty handily. Dak Prescott looks like a man reborn. He's been lighting up the league this last month or so, putting out so many amazing outings, so many 30-plus point games. Dallas are just the far superior team right now. They might end up dominating on both sides of the ball, and I think they should beat Seattle pretty convincingly as they move towards more important challenges. Anyway, as we look into the Sunday afternoon games, first you have the Indianapolis Colts versus the Tennessee Titans. The Colts surprised me big time last week with a pretty good win over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, a team I expected them to lose to. The Colts have continued to overachieve this season and are in a position to potentially make the playoffs. And compared to the Titans, who just barely beat the worst team in the NFL, aka the Panthers, you'd have to be feeling pretty good about the Colts' chances. They've already beaten this Titans team once. They've done some more impressive things overall this season. They're more proven. Gardner Minshew has looked decent at times. I like the way the offense is flowing. The defense is finding some critical stops here and there. This Titans team just looks very lifeless. I can't get over that. That's just how I feel when I watch them. I don't like what I saw in that Panthers game at all. So I think you've got to go with the Colts. Now, something to monitor in this game is the fact that Jonathan Taylor is set to miss the next couple of weeks. He has a bit of a surgery going on, a minor one, I believe, on his thumb. So he will be out. That is a critical player from that Colts offense not playing, but I think they'll be okay, as even without him, we've seen them win games. Zach Moss has done fine as the starter for this team, and I think he'll come back in and he'll make use of these couple of opportunities coming up, as the Colts should be able to defeat a Titans team that leaves a lot to be desired. Next up, the LA Chargers taking on the New England Patriots. Oh boy, November has not been pretty for either of these franchises. However, the level of struggles between these two is astronomically different. The Chargers more so have just choked, their defense usually letting them down in close games, aside from that Ravens game last week, but the Patriots, on the other hand, are a complete and utter mess. Their defense is often doing enough to keep them in games, but their offense is so horrifically bad that they are literally an F-tier team this season. Against the goddamn Giants with Tommy DeVito, they couldn't even put up more than 7 points. It was a brutally terrible game where Mac Jones has continued to show no confidence whatsoever, and the QB situation in general is a total mess and a mystery. Now, to New England's credit, they looked a bit better with Bailey Zappi in there, and maybe he could be a bit better against the Chargers, make it a somewhat competitive outing, but with how lost that offense seems in general, and their inability to put up points, it's just hard to see them keeping up with the Chargers in a game that should provide a nice bounce-back win for the LA Chargers that maybe gets them back into the playoff hunt. There's no reason why they shouldn't win this game. Next up, you got the Lions taking on the Saints. Both of these teams in this month have also struggled, and the Lions in particular, these last couple of weeks, have been on the big-time downward trend. That loss to the Packers on Thanksgiving was very ugly, and I'm not a big fan of how they played in the Bears game either. It was a struggle just to beat those guys, two teams that they should be beating in their sleep. However, they could have a bounce-back opportunity here, as they're taking on a Saints team that can't make up their mind if they're a decent team or just incredibly bad. Their offense continues to struggle at the worst times possible, and as a result, we saw them lose a game to the Falcons that they had absolutely no business losing. The Saints have talent, but for whatever reason, they just can't figure it out. I don't know if I can trust them on a game-to-game basis. The Lions have been on a slide as of late, but in general, they've been rather consistent this season. You like where they're at right now, and I think now that December's coming along, they're going to get out of that funk, and they're going to get back in the W column as just the better, more consistent team. The Saints, I would not trust at all. I think there is a lot of upset potential in the air because Detroit have looked kind of lost, but I think this is where they finally turn it around. Speaking of the Falcons, next they're going to play the New York Jets. This game could be extremely ugly. Yes, the Falcons did play pretty well in that Saints game, but the idea of Desmond Ridder and that offense being consistent seems pretty crazy in my eyes. However, they are playing a Jets team who has one of the worst offenses in the league right now. They're so desperate to change up their quarterback situation that they're starting Tim Boyle for the second week in a row. What a glamorous matchup we have. Desmond Ridder versus Tim Boyle. In all likelihood, the Falcons should be able to squeak this one out. I get the feeling it's going to be close though. Desmond Ridder is very up and down, and that Jets defense is very tough. That should keep them in the ball game, but Tim Boyle is just going to make too many mistakes. He shouldn't even be an NFL quarterback, and just because of that fact alone, the Falcons should be winning this. Moving on, we have the Arizona Cardinals versus the Pittsburgh Steelers. This one kind of interests me. I almost feel like an upset could be on the horizon. The Cardinals, as bad as they are, have shown a couple of decent performances this season since Kyler Murray came back. And the Steelers, while they did fire Matt Canada and put up 400 yards of offense in that Bengals game, still didn't look all that great. I mean, they just barely won that game. They still didn't even put up 20 points. This one could be extremely close. I could see a contest that goes like 20-17, 23-20, something along those lines, but I think I am going to stick with the Steelers. I'm very tempted to pick the Cardinals, but from a talent perspective, the Steelers have a bit more on both sides of the ball. I don't know if their offense is going to light things up necessarily, but I think in theory, under a new offense, they should be able to look a bit better week by week, but also their defense is just more trustworthy to find the big stops and hold the Cardinals to a minimal amount of points. The Cards defense leaves a lot to be desired, so I think the Steelers should be okay, but I'm not totally confident in this pick. Next up, the Miami Dolphins versus the Washington Commanders. The Commanders, well, things were looking okay for them. Sam Howell was looking pretty solid with some of his performances in early November, but then the Giants and Cowboys games happened, and now, well, I'm not too sure. And they're playing a Miami team with such an explosive offense that's less likely to make mistakes, that's getting healthier by the week. It's hard to envision the Commanders standing much of a chance. I mean, after losing to the Giants, I'm just kind of done with them. They've got to regain my trust at this point, and Miami usually does take care of business against the 500 to below 500 squads, so they should win this one without really blinking an eye. Next up is the AFC game of the week, in my eyes at least, the Denver Broncos versus the Houston Texans. Two teams that have definitely performed way above the standard that we expected from them this season. The Denver Broncos are currently the hottest team in football on a 5-game winning streak, while the Houston Texans have a shot at making the playoffs. I could see a world where either team wins this game. I trust in both teams to put up some points. I think both quarterbacks are good at limiting mistakes as well. So what this game is really going to come down to, most likely, is which defense is more reliable, which one can get the big stop in the clutch, and I think it's the Denver Broncos, who are just a bit further along in their program with a lot of those key defensive veterans. I can see a world where the Broncos get a stop late in the game on a crucial 4th down, or maybe they hold the Texans to a field goal, and then Russell Wilson can march down the field in a 2-minute drill to win the game. The fact is, the Broncos are just the hottest team right now, and I think until they lose and they show us otherwise, there's no reason to go against them. Not to mention, well, at least in my opinion, the Broncos have just looked better as this winning streak has gone on. It started with edging out these ugly wins to recently, in the last couple of weeks, looking like an actual football team that truly does deserve to win these games by playing well on both sides. I like where the Broncos are at right now, and I trust them to get this win. Next up, you got the Carolina Panthers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Bucs let me down, I'm not gonna lie. I thought they'd be able to defeat the Colts, and I'm a little sad with how they performed overall in that one. However, they're playing the Panthers. no matter what the health is with their quarterback or any of the other things. Just the fact that they're playing the Panthers should mean they get this win. The Panthers can barely even score above 10 points in a game. Their offense is absolutely horrendous. Their defense is banged up. It helps that they finally fired Frank Reich, but at this point, I think the damage is already done, and I don't really know if it can get much better, at least this season. So you just gotta ride with the Bucs. The Panthers are the worst team, the Bucs are at least decent, so that's all there is to it. For a more interesting 4 p.m. game, the Cleveland Browns take on the LA Rams in a bit of an inter-conference battle. This one's a very tough call to make. I really do think it's one of those 50-50 matches where it wouldn't be surprising if either side won, but I think I'm going to pick the Browns. I'm not super confident about that, but I'm liking Cleveland for a couple of reasons. For one, they've shown they can win games even if their offense isn't doing much. That defense can carry them to victories alone. They did it in the Pittsburgh game recently, amongst others. If they can just hold their opponents to a low number of points, you know that eventually their offense is going to be in a position to maybe kick that game-winning field goal and edge out an ugly win. In general, we have seen the Browns do that a bunch of times this season. It didn't work too great in the Broncos game, but they're a hot team right now. I don't blame them too much. I think their luck could be a lot better against the Rams. And the reason for that gets me into reason number 2, is that I think their pass rush is going to be a problem in this game. The Rams' offensive line on more than one occasion this season has been beaten and battered, and Matt Stafford has been sacked time after time. That O-line really is not very good, and against Myles Garrett in this Browns unit, that is going to be a problem. I like the Rams' run game, and Matt Stafford has shown that he can clutch out some big drives this season, but I think the Rams are going to fall short in the end. I don't think it's going to be a pretty game from either team. I'm expecting it to be close, but I think because of that Browns defense, maybe they can force a turnover late in the game and get that W. Speaking of really tough games to judge, how about the game of the week, boys? San Francisco versus Philadelphia, a battle to decide supremacy over the NFC. These two are definitely the two best teams in the NFC and probably in the league in general right now. And it's also a rematch of last year's NFC Championship game. There's a lot to look forward to in this one. I mean, you already know that San Francisco has had this one circled on the calendar for weeks. They're pumped to get out there and have their revenge game, so to speak, with a healthy Brock Purdy. They're ready to go and to show us that the Eagles got lucky the last time. The 49ers have the talent and the resources and arguably the best odds of any team right now to defeat the Eagles. However, I still don't know if they actually have what it takes. I mean, it seems like they should be able to beat them. Vegas literally is favoring them, for crying out loud. But the thing is, the Eagles always seem to find a way. No matter how they start, and oftentimes they have started out kind of rough this season, they figured it out late in the game to overcome adversity. They've been down multiple scores against some great teams in recent weeks just to pull it out. Jalen Hurts and those guys are playing extremely clutch. Their defense is very capable of making the stops as well. This team is really hard to stop. Although some people might argue, along with the 49ers being good, that the Eagles are probably overdue to lose one of these close games. It seems unlikely with all of these tough opponents that they'd win all of them, right? But I'm really not that sure. I mean, just think back to the Vikings last year, a significantly worse team. They won almost all of their games by a one-score margin. Why couldn't the Eagles do the same? They've been so damn clutch this year. They have it on both sides of the ball. That clutch pass rush, a good run game, and Jalen Hurts throwing absolute dimes when his team needs him to the most. And if I'm putting the game in these quarterbacks' hands, I trust Jalen Hurts more than Brock Purdy in a close matchup to get this win. The 49ers have an excellent chance of pulling this off, and I wouldn't even be shocked if they win big, but the Eagles just continue to win and prove all of the doubters wrong. I think you've got to rock with the Eagles. They're just the best team in the league right now. And rounding out Sunday with, I don't know why this is the primetime game, the Kansas City Chiefs versus the Green Bay Packers. The Packers are surprising us all right now. They looked dead to right just a couple of weeks ago, but now here through the Chargers and the Lions game, they've been on a roll. They've looked a lot more impressive on both sides of the ball. In particular, Jordan Love has shown some significant improvement, leading to some major strides in that Packers offense. But now you're going up against Pat Mahomes and the Chiefs. That Chiefs defense is legit, definitely a lot better than that of Detroit or, of course, the Chargers. So that's something to consider in this Packers game, whether or not they can keep that ball rolling. But also, I don't really know if he can outduel Pat Mahomes. It's still very early in Jordan Love's career. I don't know how much I can trust him just yet. I mean, there is always a possibility the Chiefs' offense will lay an egg and the receivers will crap the bed, as they've done a couple of times this season, but I think it'll be just fine for them. I don't think it's going to be a situation where that matters. I don't think the game's going to be super close where those drops will make a difference. I'm expecting the Chiefs to win this one handily, just because, more experienced offense and a better defense overall. Although I do think we could see some decent flashes from the Packers that makes this game at least somewhat watchable. And finally, on Monday night, the Bengals versus the Jaguars. Now, usually, this would be a pretty exciting matchup to look forward to, but with Joe Burrow lost for the season and Jake Browning stepping in, I don't know how much you can really look forward to the Bengals taking the field for the rest of this season. Now, in his defense, he hasn't looked that horrible in either game he's played, but it hasn't resulted in a lot of points. The Bengals do have a lot of talent to help him out with Joe Mixon and Jamar Chase and whatnot, but with the inexperience he has, I don't know if it's going to matter. Maybe if he had a couple of more weeks, you'd feel a bit more confident. But this Jags team is really, really good, and they have been on a hot streak as of late. You just love the way they're playing. That big win over the Texans was huge for their confidence in morale. I think that Trevor Lawrence, with how he's played the last couple of weeks, should be able to hang up a decent number of points on a Bengals team that will leave him a lot of opportunities. Jaguars should be taking this. It's a really sad end to the Bengals, but this is their destiny. And that's going to do it for my Week 13 NFL predictions and previews of all of the games. It's a bit of a short week, as a whopping 6 teams are on their bye week, meaning we only have 13 games. But luckily, we've got a couple of home run hits to potentially look forward to. It should be a really fun week of football, and I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments below on who you have winning the games this week. And of course, make sure to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more NFL content every single week.